Hi, welcome back. Today we are reading Chapter 8, A New Flavor for Cake. On the last day of the school term, the students said goodbye to their teacher. Mr. Phillips was not coming back for the next school year. But it was also a time of hellos in Avonlea. A new minister and his wife had arrived, Reverend and Mrs. Allen. A very nice young couple. The town liked them at once. Anne fell in love with Mrs. Allen and knew that they would be the best of friends. "I suppose we must have Mr. and Mrs. Allen up to tea some day soon," said Marilla one day. "Next Wednesday would be a good time, but don't say a word to Matthew about it. He is so shy, the thought of a new minister's wife will frighten him to death." "Oh, Marilla," Anne begged, "will you let me make a cake? I'd love to do something for Mrs. Allen. You know I can make a pretty good cake now." "Well, you can make a layer cake," promised Marilla. Having the minister and his wife to tea was a serious project. Anne was so excited, she talked it all over with Diana on Tuesday as they sat outside in the twilight. "Everything is ready, Diana, except my cake. I'll make that in the morning. We're going to have 2 kinds of jelly, and lemon pie and cherry pie, and 3 kinds of cookies, and fruit cake and layer cake. Oh, Diana, what if my cake doesn't turn out right?" Anne remembered how many mistakes she had made while learning to cook. "It'll be good. I know it will," assured Diana, who was a very comfortable sort of friend. Wednesday morning, Anne got up at sunrise. She had a bad cold from staying out in the damp air with Diana the night before, but nothing less than ammonia would keep her out of the kitchen today. After breakfast, she carefully made her cake. It came out of the oven light and feathery. Anne put it together with layers of ruby jelly. The tea was a big success. Even shy Matthew enjoyed himself. At last, Anne passed out pieces of her layer cake. Mrs. Allen helped herself to a big piece. So did the minister and Marilla. Mrs. Allen took a bite and got a very strange look on her face. She didn't say anything, though, but she didn't want to hurt Anne's feeling. Marilla tasted the cake. "Anne Shirley," she said, "what did you put into this cake?" "Only what the recipe said, Marilla," cried Anne. "Oh, isn't it all right?" "It's awful, Anne. Taste it yourself. What flavoring did you use?" "Well, vanilla," Anne said, her face turning red. "Only vanilla." "Go and bring me the bottle of vanilla you used." Anne ran to the pantry. She returned with the bottle labeled Best Vanilla. Marilla took it, uncorked it, and smelled it. "Mercy, Anne, this is liniment. I broke the medicine bottle last week and poured what was left into an old empty vanilla bottle. I should have warned you, but for pity's sake, couldn't you smell it?" Anne burst into tears. "I couldn't. I have such a cold I can't smell anything." She ran sobbing from the room. Mrs. Allen followed her quietly. "My dear, don't cry," she said. "Why, it's all just a funny mistake that anybody could make." "Oh, no, it takes me to make mistakes like this," said Anne sadly. "And I wanted that cake to be so nice for you, Mrs. Allen." "Yes, I know, dear. I appreciate the thought very much. Now, don't cry any more. Come show me your flower garden. I love flowers." No one said anything more about the liniment cake. After the guests left, Anne sighed. "Marilla, isn't it nice to think that tomorrow is a new day with no mistakes in it yet?" Toward the end of the summer, Anne came running home to Green Gables. "Marilla, Mrs. Allen invited me to tea at the minister's house tomorrow. She is going to invite each of the girls in our Sunday school class, one at a time." Anne thought that the next morning would never come. She worried that it might rain and spoil her plans. When she woke up, sunshine was pouring in her window. It was a beautiful morning and a perfect day for tea. "Oh, Marilla," Anne said, "I feel so good. I could be good every day if I was invited out to tea." "Marilla, but what if I don't act properly? I don't know much about good manners. I'm afraid I'll do something silly." "Just do what you think will be the nicest for Mrs. Allen," said Marilla wisely. "If you think about her instead of yourself, you'll get along fine." Anne went to the tea and used her very best manners. She told Marilla all about it later. "Oh, Marilla, I've had a most wonderful time. When I got there, Mrs. Allen met me at the door. She was dressed in a pale pink dress with lace and pearls. She looked like an angel. Mrs. Allen is such a good person. I just love her. I wish I could be good. We had an elegant tea, and I think I minded my manners just fine. Mrs. Allen and I had a heart-to-heart talk. I told her all about living with Mrs. Thomas and Mrs. Hammond and all the children I took care of. I told her about coming to Green Gables and my troubles over geometry. And would you believe it? Marilla, Mrs. Allen told me she was a dunce at geometry too. I told her all about Diana and our playhouse. Mrs. Lynde stopped by just before I left. She said the trustees have hired a new teacher, and it's a lady. Her name is Miss Muriel Stacy. Isn't that a romantic name? I think it will be wonderful to have a lady teacher. I don't see how I'm going to live through the 2 weeks before school begins. I can hardly wait.